buying non-investment grade properties with no fundamentals or long-term potential, buying rubbish quality stock disguised as data-driven decisions. It's a massive mistake.
You just can't buy any property because the data says so. This is common in volume-based property buyers agencies and coaching circles, where they're all relying on the data to make investment decisions with no focus on the long-term fundamentals of a location. It's all about closing the deal. Only using data as a decision-making tool and ignoring personal approach is a marketing gimmick. This can artificially inflate prices in a location for the short term and mislead investors in making poor decisions. It's a long-term cost.
And what you need to question is, are vital red flags about the property being ignored just because the data ticks off? You don't want to buy a lemon. Data is only one part of it. It ignores the human interaction or the research or asking good questions or looking at what are the upsides and what are the downsides. The data will not tell you that. The property downsides are not considered, like hazard zone. Any downside with the property data can't tell you about. It's not considered. Are there any downside with the location itself, or are you just buying for the sake of it because the data says?
Effectively, you need to ask, are these professionals just salespeople disguised as property advisors? Have they built a property portfolio? Have they walked on the journey that you are on? Or are they just there to sell you, be your buyer's agent or a coach, but actually sell you a property?
What other considerations are involved, or is it just about closing the deal and moving on and you're the one stuck with that property? So I want to talk through some case studies that we consider as investment grade properties. So our client can purchase these 3 properties.
Yeah. So when Ken came to us, his idea was that at that time, he wanted to buy one expensive properties and newish one as well. But after some conversations, given there was opportunity at the time at these price points, in February 2021, we purchased the first property for $540K. And then we purchased a next door property for him for $525K.
So these properties were side by side,
which gave them about 1,400 square meter block of land, which can be developed down the track. It was about jumping in a rising market, and first properties have had 30% gains already.
700K current value, and then the second one is worth 680. And then more recently, we purchased a third property, and this time more capital growth and being closer into the city was the goal. This property was bought in May, 788, bread and butter, 4-bed, 2-bath, rented for $570 per week. He's just on path to building this rental income of $77,480, provided, of course, that he pays down the loan. That's a caveat there. But he's bought these solid properties that will grow over the longer.
So our client Jane and John purchased these 2 properties. The first one was $430K in June 2020. Market value would be in the mid 700s in about 24 months. And then they've recently purchased property number 2 for $660K, renting for $550 per week. So there's capital growth, there's cash flow pay, plus there's zone for future development. The first one is zone, and the second one does give potential for some sort of development, it being a more than 1,000 square meter block. So it was these both properties are close to infrastructure. There's the long-term growth fundamentals. They're outside hazard zones. Property number 2, again, it's capital growth, cash flow, and land banking, potential to subdivision subject to council approvals or building a granny plan. Jane and John are on path to adding $54,000 of passive income based on current rents. But obviously over time, rents will rise, which will add to their income.
And of course, they need to pay down the debt as well to enable that. But they've bought these with that in mind in the future.
Talking about our clients, Daniel and Helen. Firstly purchased this $565K house in May 2021, renting for $530 a week. Market value would be around about 700 grand in 12 months. With this particular property, there's capital growth, cash flow play, there's dual occupancy because it's built upstairs and downstairs, close to infrastructure, and there's long-term potential and outside hazard zones. Daniel and Helen have settled their second property, which was purchased for $602K in May 2022, renting for $480 per week. This is a capital growth and cash flow play, and they're on par to adding $52,000 of passive income based on current rent.
So these are investment grades, but we also want to talk about what's not an investment grade property. So this particular complex, one of our clients, when they came to us, they had already bought this property a long time before they came to us. It's a brand new townhouse purchased from an investment club in a large complex of 38 townhouses. It was bought for $360K in Brisbane, brand new. And the concerns we had with this deal was it was sold as tax benefits being the key selling point. There were no comparable sales considered at the time, 2009. In Brisbane, that was the property boom times. but property was still cheaper than what it is today. Future growth potential wasn't considered. And over time, a similar townhouse in that complex sold for 250K in 2020. So that's 11 years later. The property had gone negative equity. In value right now is still 360K.
So pretty much what they paid for the 13 years ago.
An alternate would have been a house for less price than this in the same location with land component, which would be worth around 650K.
So they paid a premium for a brand new property, so they could have bought a house for cheaper than that.
And almost double their money. And the opportunity cost for this runs into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Imagine if they bought the house, it grew in value, and they maybe bought a few other properties if they were able to, borrowing permitting, they may have multiplied even up to 1.8 mil portfolio potentially, rather than staying stuck with that 360K property.
Buying quality investment property is about fundamentals, data, along with potential growth, cash flow, and a tailored approach. It's not a dartboard approach. It's not about just buying multiple cheapy properties, including poorly located houses with short-term growth and cash flow.
So if there will be little resale value or equity growth down the track and there are still no fundamentals, you miss out on decades of growth. So you might get sold a cheapy house just because the data says so, because there's some short-term growth the data is demonstrating and there's some short-term cash flow, you will still be stuck. So when we started our property portfolio in 2009 and several years after that, during that time in the property circles, there was a big deal about buying lots of cheapy properties. And I raised this with a mortgage broker who ended up becoming our business mentor. And I said to him, I want to buy XYZ property, maybe in Broken Hill, because it's so cheap. Buy multiple properties like that because I'll have more properties. But the aha moment was it will kill your leapfrogging strategy to buy multiple. If you can't generate equity and buy rubbish properties, you can't get ahead anyway. It's quality over quantity. You may miss out on decades of growth, or worse, get stuck with a property for the long haul, unable to move forward.